All right, guys and girls, welcome back to the AlwaysMoto Podcast. We are now on the YouTube channel as well. And if you're not watching, you should be listening and watching, whichever. I think I got that around backwards, but you know what I'm talking about. If you're not doing one, you should be doing the other. And if you should be subscribed on both is the point we're making here. Now, let's get into this emergency department ahead of A1, Anaheim 1, 2024, Super Motocross. It's here, ready to go. Who's injured? Who's coming back? Let's get you that information right now. Brought to you by Leatt Moto Australia. Let's hit the emergency department drop and let's run through it. The emergency department. All the injuries, all the gory details, and when they'll be back on track. It's the list you really don't want to be on. I say it every time. It's no different in 2024. You do not want to be on this list, particularly before the first round of the season. But there are people already on the list. We're going to go through them. We're going to go through a few other things of note, who's making returns. It's not a comprehensive list because obviously heading into A1, we don't get all the same information, the same coverage, the same contacts. So take it a little bit of a grain of salt because we might have missed a couple here. We're going to build on that. So stay with us, subscribe. You'll see the videos in the future weeks and we'll catch up on those because some of this stuff will come to light at A1 press conference, interviews post-race, etc., that they've had issues leading in, and that'll make more sense and we'll add to our list as we go. We're the only one tracking this sort of information from an injury point of view, so make sure you stay with AlwaysMoto Podcast. All right, things to note. Let's start there. One, Jorge Prado is coming over for AMA Supercross. He's doing the opening 3 rounds, but he was on social media promoting that he's now got a hyperbaric chamber at his house in the US there. What is a hyperbaric chamber? It is basically a little shell that you jump yourself into, you zip yourself in, or you shut yourself in, depending on what type. It might be a little tent version that you've got at home. It might be a nice big container that you get in at a facility. But basically, it gives you a high concentration of oxygen into that area that you can breathe in, so you can actually get more oxygen into your lungs and utilize it quicker. It helps with recovery. So obviously Prado is trying to aid his recovery while he's learning Supercross. Maybe he's had a couple of bumps and bruises along the way, but it does help with tissue regeneration. It does help promote things like stem cells and growth hormones and all that stuff to be released. And that then encourages your body to recover quicker, rebuild, repair, all that sort of stuff. So it's not a super duper thing. It's one of those extra pieces of equipment that you can utilize to try and improve your recovery. Is it completely effective? It's shown in research to be useful for everybody. It's not, it might be good for some, it might be better for others. He's given it a crack. He's obviously a high-level athlete. He's trying to encourage his recovery as best he can. He's using a hyperbaric chamber. So it's something I thought would bring up here at the start. One, also to point out that Jorge Prado is doing Supercross in the AMA, but also about that hyperbaric chamber. Now, out following injuries that we know about preseason so far. Richard Taylor, privateer, is out. He's managed to break his femur and his kneecap. He's having issues with that, but he is had surgery. He'll be on the recovery path. When he'll be back, it's unknown at this stage. We'll check in with Richard in the next few weeks and see how that recovery is going, but he is out for A1. Grant Harlan is out for A1, but he is back on the bike as of a week or so ago. That is from his pelvic fracture that he sustained in France at the MX of Nations, but he is back on the bike. He is expecting to be back in around 4 weeks or so from now. We have checked in with Grant. He's on the recovery path there. He did sort of mention a couple of races that would be ideal, but he's going to obviously take it step by step and see how his fitness returns as his recovery continues to go along. Jonah Geistler, privateer, was going to ride 450s this year for the Supercross Series, managed to get 2 broken arms, a wrist and an elbow along the way, and a finger or so. He is out. He will be on the recovery path. He's had surgery on both. He'll be towards the end of that point where he'll be almost back on the bike too. We'll have to check in with Jonah to see where his details are up to for his recovery, but he will be back as soon as he possibly can be, which will probably be somewhere later in January. We'll see how that goes. Chris Prebula had a big one in a practice track in California. He is out with multiple injuries, a few spinal issues along the way there for Chris. We have spoken to him originally at the injury point. We haven't checked in with him recently, but he'll be out for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. Dylan Schwartz is on the injury list. We're not completely sure of how all those details are. It's a bit hard to get them direct from BarX. We have reached out. We got initial contact with them, but they wouldn't pass on any other information. But he will likely be back in a few weeks. He'll probably miss those few rounds initially of the West Coast. We'll see how that plays out for Dylan. Leo Tucker is on the list as well. Unfortunately, again, not too many details there from Leo's side of things. We'll bring that back up in future episodes. We've had some word from some insiders here. Now, we can't reveal those sources, but we've had some injuries at the Star Racing compound, or at least with the Star Racing Yamaha team riders, and that might be why some of these guys aren't heading to the West Coast to commence their 2024 season. Stilez Robertson, Nick Romano might be two names that won't be at that opening round because of some injuries that have been dealt with over the preseason. No details as such on both of them. Stilez, we believe, is a wrist, and Nick, we believe, is a shoulder. We believe he's already been back on the bike. Again, source was limited on information, but we got some out of him. But what we could draw some conclusions from, and these are my own conclusions at this point with Nick, is that he had potentially an AC joint, which is that shoulder injury where the collarbone meets the shoulder blade, that ligament that sits there and holds that down. And I'm tapping that behind my microphone. If anyone's wondering, watching on the YouTube, and if you're not watching YouTube, well, you're missing out on my little hand gestures as we're going along. So that AC joint usually is only a couple of week recovery, and he's back and ready to go. So he'll probably be getting ready to be on East Coast. Stilez might miss a bit longer. We'll have to see once we get a bit more information. I'm hoping that once we get to this A1 round, like I mentioned before, some information will become a bit more freely available. So we'll see how that all comes out. Thai Masterpool, as we've updated, everyone was a little bit slow on this one. They put out, the HBI team put out the release, but nobody popped the information up. We did. That's what we do here at AlwaysMoto, is the injury updates. We checked in with Matt Bell, the team owner there as well. Ty had obviously that appendix issue through the super motocross side of things that he rode through. He's had that removed, but at the same time that he had that removed, because he was going to be off for a while, he had some work done to an ankle injury that had been giving him grief. Now, I checked in with Matt because I thought it might be linked to an injury that he had with his lower leg in 2020. Matt confirmed that it wasn't the case. There's actually another issue that he's had since then that's a bit more of an overuse injury. Now, overuse in the ankle tends to be like tendonitis, those sorts of tendinopathy issues. Maybe there was a stress fracture. So details weren't completely confirmed there from Matt as to what it was, but it was an overuse injury. But they're expecting to have him back in a few weeks, hopefully by the end. He mentioned San Diego, so that's sort of the end of the month. We'll have to see how that plays out. But we're going to try and check in with Matt Bell here on the AlwaysMoto podcast here in a couple of weeks, probably around that time that Ty is going to be coming back, so we could be able to get some more info on it then. Pro Circuit Kawasaki, interestingly, put out Max Voland and Levi Kitchen onto the West Coast, and that's probably because Cameron Mcadoo is not ready to be racing at this point. Again, another potential AC joint injury here, that shoulder issue, which we don't have details on. This is all speculation from AlwaysMoto here at this point. Depending on what side it was, because Cameron Mcadoo was coming back from a shoulder injury from last year where he had to have a repair done to his whole shoulder. If it's on the same side, that's not great, and that might take a little bit longer. Will he be ready for East Coast? I'm sure that's what they're pushing for. He's got 4 weeks. We'll see how that plays out. The last one on the list is potentially going to miss Anaheim 1. We've been talking to him. He's our Aussie guy that's coming over. He's going to be on Team PRMX Kawasaki. It's Aaron Tanti. Now, Aaron had a major injury in the World Supercross in Abu Dhabi. He didn't get to race Newcastle Australian Supercross. He didn't get to race the final Australian and World Supercross rounds in Melbourne at the end of the year. He was stuck in Abu Dhabi for a few weeks there because he wasn't able to fly from all the rib fractures and lung issues. Those are reportedly okay, but he's getting some investigations done on some other issues that he's been having that's prevented him from riding. He is in the States. He has ridden the bike twice, but that's it. He's not sure he's going to be able to ride Anaheim 1. He's getting some checks done this week. At the time of recording, he wasn't sure if he's riding or not. So we'll have to wait and see what happens if he rolls out there for A1. It's kind of looking like he won't. but we're not 100% sure at this stage. And again, Aaron is someone we're going to check in with. We've already lined him up, hopefully for next week. So maybe you'll be hearing his voice on the AlwaysMoto podcast next week. We'll have to wait and see. All right, so they're the injuries that we know about at this point in time. Like I said, we had some information there. We sort of teased at it from some of the group chats that we've got going. Now, the other side of things, making some returns. And if you don't recall, but Eli Tomac will be back this week. It'll be his first race back since that Achilles injury at that second last round there in Denver Supercross. How will Eli Tomac go? Not sure. I did have an interesting bit of a tweet there on X, Twitter, call it Twitter, whatever, about what would be the reason Eli Tomac might not win a race in 2024? And would it be age? Would it be injury recovery? Would it be his fitness? Would it be something else? Completely hypothetical, but there is the chance that this year might be the time that he doesn't win another race. He's getting up there in age. He does have that injury to return from. Now, the Achilles is a major injury. I don't care who or what you are or what sport you play. Achilles is a major injury. Yes, we don't have the same impact and loading aspects in a repeated sense and a directional change as, say, NFL, NRL, soccer, etc. But the force in a singular motion at the point, like how he tore it in the first place, is extremely high for Moto. Will he be running some ankle saver pegs? Don't know. So that was something interesting in World Supercross in Melbourne. Vince Friese had an Achilles injury last year. And 3 out of the 4 bikes for Moto Concepts in World Supercross were running ankle saver foot pegs because of the Vince Friese injury to his Achilles. Will Tomac be doing something similar? I'd love to see some spy pics of his pegs at A1 to see if that is the case or not. But there's a big question mark over how he will go across the season in 2024. But he will be back in action at A1, which is awesome to see. Another one making his first ride back for quite a long time. He rode 2 rounds of Supercross in 2023. It's Malcolm Stewart. He's going to be back from that knee injury. He tore basically every ligament in his knee and had to get it repaired, which is a major job. He's been out for quite some time, but he is apparently back on the bike and flying at the test tracks as all reports. So will he be flying at A1? We'll have to wait and see, but he is back from that knee injury. Ideally, he can get a full season in again and finally get through the motocross season would be an awesome one. He only got a few rounds last year because he had an injury at the end of Supercross. He is meant to be on that Husky team for motocross and Supercross. It just hasn't worked out that way so far since that deal was signed. But he's back for Supercross this weekend. Justin Barsha will be another one making a return. He had those issues at the end of the Super Motocross. He crashed just after he took that lead in the final and one of the races there at the LA Coliseum. He will be back in action. How his recovery and return will be going. He's not very public on his training and recovery processes. He does do some other promotional things, but nothing about his injury and return. But I dare say he'll be fine by the time he's at A1. Will he be in that winning form that he usually is for A1? Probably. We'll have to wait and see. But Christian Craig, sort of a return. He did ride MX of Nations, but just remember, this will be his first Supercross race back in the AMA side of things since his injuries where he dislocated a hip and broke an elbow and now doesn't have a radial head in that elbow. But MX of Nations was a reasonable run for him. He should be well and truly up to speed and up to fitness heading to A1 this weekend. And an interesting one, I was checking through the entry list for A1. That entry list one, the interesting part is that it's incomplete. There's plenty of people missing from that entry list in the 450 class that I noticed. So good on you, AMA. Maybe the people haven't entered yet. I don't know. But if they've put out an entry list at this point, you would think that those guys like Jason Anderson, like who else did I have on there? Chase Sexton wasn't on there. You'd think those guys would be entered by now. But anyway, they weren't on there. But somebody who was on there and surprised me that he was on there, Kyle Greason, the privateer who had a massive injury in the preseason last year with a lumbar fracture that took a lot of time to heal because of the type of fracture it was. It was a bit more of a wedge compression fracture. He's back. He's heading to A1. I checked in with him afterwards. He says he's all good. We're going to probably check in with him in a week or two as well to see how his season is going. But But awesome to see that Kyle's recovery has finally got to a point that he could be, one, be back on a bike, but two, competitive again. So that's awesome to see. All right, that is our emergency department for the opening round at Anaheim 1. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast feed, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to keep up to date with all things Always Moto and all the injuries in our sport in the AMA 2024 season as the Super Motocross progresses throughout the year. All right, that's the end of the YouTube video. We're going to take a quick break on the Always Moto podcast. We'll be back with more.